Blood stained the ground where her husband had fallen, yet Sarah Williams could only stare in disbelief as an Apache warrior stepped between her twins and his approaching war party, risking everything to protect those he should have considered enemies. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The fog clung to the Arizona mountains like a spirit unwilling to depart this world. Dawn had barely broken, the faint glow of sunrise filtering through a sky heavy with moisture and foreboding. Running. Elk moved silently through the forest, his moccasins hardly disturbing the damp earth beneath him. At 32, his body bore the marks of a lifetime of hunting and war, a scar across his left shoulder from a cavalry saber, calloused hands that knew both the weight of weapons and the gentleness required to craft intricate beadwork. His people, the Chiricahua Apache, had once roamed these lands freely. Now they were confined to smaller territories, pushed back by an endless tide of settlers with their wooden homes, iron tools, and invisible boundaries drawn on papers his people had never signed. Running Elk had watched his father, Strong Bear, negotiate with white men whose words changed like the wind, had seen treaties broken before the ink had dried. This morning, he had been sent by Chief Ironhawk to scout the perimeter of what the white men now called Henderson County. More settlers had arrived, cutting trees, building cabins, bringing cattle that trampled the plants his people had harvested for generations. The council needed to know their numbers, their weapons, their intentions. Running Elk crested a ridge and paused, his dark eyes scanning the valley below. Through the shifting veils of fog, he could make out 3 cabins spread across newly cleared land. Thin wisps of smoke rose from one chimney, but the others stood silent. Something wasn't right. Even in the early hour, settlers were usually awake, tending animals, preparing for the day's labor. He descended the slope with practiced stealth, moving from tree to tree, his buckskin clothing blending with the muted colors of the forest. As he drew closer, the scent reached him, blood, gunpowder, the acrid smell of fear. His muscles tensed, hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. The first cabin came into view, its door hanging askew from broken hinges. Outside, the body of a man lay face down in the mud, a pool of darkened blood spread beneath him. Running Elk approached cautiously, scanning for movement, for threats. The man had been shot in the back, probably while trying to flee. Not the work of his people. Apache warriors faced their enemies, did not shoot them from behind like cowards. This was the work of raiders, lawless men who preyed on isolated homesteads, taking what they wanted and leaving death in their wake. Running Elk had heard the stories, had seen their aftermath before. They were neither white nor Indian, but something worse. Men who had abandoned all codes of honor. The second cabin had been burned, its charred timbers still smoldering in the damp air. But it was the third cabin, set back against the edge of the forest, that drew his attention. Unlike the others, its door was closed, its windows intact. And unlike the silence that surrounded the other dwellings, from this one came a sound that stopped Running Elk in his tracks. A baby's cry, quickly muffled. He moved toward the sound, all senses alert. This could be a trap. Raiders sometimes left survivors to lure rescuers, but something in that cry pulled at him, reminded him of his sister's child, born just before the last winter snow. The cabin door was barricaded from within. Running Elk circled to a window, peering through a gap in the roughly hewn shutters. Inside, in the dim light, he could make out a woman, her back pressed against a corner, a rifle across her knees. She was young, perhaps 26, her blonde hair falling in tangled disarray around a face streaked with soot and tears. Cradled against her chest were 2 infants, swaddled tightly, their faces barely visible. The woman's eyes were wide with exhaustion and terror, darting toward every sound. She had not slept, that much was clear. How long had she been holding that position, protecting her children against whatever might come through the door? Running Elk stepped back, conflicted. His duty was to report back to the war party that would be following his trail by midday. Chief Ironhawk had been clear. These settlements were encroaching on hunting grounds promised to the Apache in the last treaty. The council had decided that a message must be sent. The settlers must be driven back, their buildings burned, a boundary established in blood if necessary. But this woman, these children, they were not warriors. They were not even part of the endless negotiations and betrayals. They were simply caught in a conflict they likely didn't understand. A twig snapped in the forest behind him. Running Elk turned, hand on his knife, but relaxed when he recognized Two Hawks, a young warrior sent to find him when he'd been gone too long. "The war party approaches," Two Hawks said in their language, voice low. "What have you found?" Running Elk looked back at the cabin, at the woman within who fought sleep to keep her children safe. "Raiders have been here," he replied. "They have done our work for us on 2 cabins. And that one," Two Hawks nodded toward the intact structure. Running Elk felt the weight of the moment press upon him like a physical force. His answer would determine whether 3 more lives would end this day. "Nothing," he said finally. "It is abandoned." But even as the lie left his lips, Running Elk knew that his path had just changed forever. Sarah Williams hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her arms ached from holding the twins and the rifle across her lap. Every creak of the cabin's timber walls made her flinch. Every whisper of wind through the crude chinking between logs sounded like approaching footsteps. The twins, James and Emma, had finally fallen into exhausted slumber after crying for hours, hungry and frightened by their mother's fear. 3 days ago, Sarah had been hanging laundry when Thomas, her husband of 4 years, had ridden up with news that the Burkett family, 2 homesteads over, had been found dead, their cabin ransacked, their livestock stolen. "Raiders," he'd said. "Not Indians. Worse. Men with no tribe, no law, no honor." "We should leave," Sarah had urged, clutching Thomas's arm. "Go back to Fort Collins until the cavalry sweeps the area." But Thomas, stubborn and proud like all the Williams men, had shaken his head. "This is our land, Sarah. Everything we have is here. I won't be chased off by thieves and murderers." That night, they'd barricaded the doors and windows. Thomas had loaded both rifles and his revolver, placing them strategically around their small home. "Just for a few days," he'd promised. Until we hear the raiders have moved on." But yesterday morning, while Thomas was checking the perimeter of their property, Sarah had heard the shots, 3 in rapid succession, then silence. She'd grabbed the twins from their cradle and the rifle from above the door, then watched through a crack in the shutters as 3 men dragged Thomas's body into the yard. They'd laughed, passing a bottle between them before turning toward the cabin. Sarah had fired a warning shot through the window. Whether luck or providence, the bullet had struck close enough to one raider that he'd jumped back, cursing. They'd tried to force entry twice more before night fell, but Sarah's desperate shots had kept them at bay. Near dawn, she'd heard them ride off, but she didn't trust the silence. Raiders were known to pretend departure, only to catch those who emerged thinking danger had passed. So she waited, her back against the corner where she could see both the door and windows, the twins nestled against her chest, her rifle ready despite arms that trembled with exhaustion. She had 6 bullets left and a promise to herself that the last 2 would be for her children if the worst came to pass. No fate could be worse than falling into the hands of such men. A sound outside the window made her freeze. Not the heavy tread of boots, but something lighter, deliberate, someone trying not to be heard. Sarah shifted the twins, wincing as her stiff muscles protested, and raised the rifle. "Please, Thomas," she whispered, though she'd seen them drag his body away. "Please be watching over us now." The shadow that passed before the window wasn't that of a raider. Even in her exhausted state, Sarah could see the difference in the silhouette. Tall, lean, hair longer than any settler would wear. The feather that adorned it confirmed her fears. Apache. Her throat closed in terror. The raiders had been bad enough, but at least they were a known quantity. The Apache were spoken of in whispers around settler campfires, fearsome warriors who left no survivors, who tortured captives, who appeared and vanished like ghosts. Yet why just one? Apache raiders usually came in war parties, and why was he being so cautious? If the Indians had come to attack, surely they would have stormed the cabin already. Sarah steadied her rifle, aiming at the window, though her hands shook badly now. Emma stirred against her chest, making a small sound of distress. Sarah hushed her automatically, rocking slightly, never taking her eyes from the window. The shadow moved away. Sarah strained to hear, catching the faint sound of voices, not English, but the musical, flowing language she'd once heard from a distance when a trading party had come to Fort Collins. Then silence. Minutes passed. Sarah's eyelids grew heavier. The rifle barrel dipped, then jerked back up as she startled herself awake. She couldn't fall asleep, couldn't let her guard down, not with James and Emma depending on her. A soft knock at the door made her jerk upright, heart pounding. "Hello, cabin?" The voice was deep, male, speaking English with an accent she couldn't place. "I am alone. I mean no harm." Sarah said nothing, adjusting her grip on the rifle. "Raiders have gone," the voice continued, "but others come, my people. They will burn cabin if they find it." "You must leave now." "Why should I believe you?" Sarah called back, voice cracking from disuse and fear. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" A pause. "Your husband is dead. In the field. I am sorry. But your children still live. If you stay, all will die when my people arrive." Sarah felt a chill run through her. How did he know about Thomas? About the twins? "I can help," the voice continued, "but you must trust." Now. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Trust. Trust an Apache warrior she couldn't see, when her husband lay dead outside, when raiders might still be lurking, when everything she'd ever been told about Indians warned against exactly this. Yet what choice did she have? If he spoke truth about others coming, staying meant certain death. "How do I know you won't kill us the moment I open this door?" she demanded. Another pause, longer this time. "I have sister," he said finally. "She has small ones like yours. I am uncle. I cannot..." He seemed to struggle for words. "Cannot see more children die. Too much death already." Something in his tone made Sarah believe him, the hesitation, the mention of his family. Or perhaps it was simply that after 36 hours of terror and grief, any chance, no matter how slim, seemed better than the certainty of waiting for death. "Step away from the door," she said. 10 paces back, where I can see you." "Yes," came the reply. "I will wait." Sarah rose shakily to her feet, the twins cradled in one arm, the rifle clutched in her free hand. She moved to the door, fumbling with the barricade of furniture she'd pushed against it. Each piece she moved felt impossibly heavy, her muscles screaming in protest. Finally, the door was clear. Sarah took a deep breath, adjusted the twins against her shoulder, and with trembling fingers lifted the wooden bar that secured the door. Outside, in the misty morning light, stood the Apache warrior. As promised, he waited at a distance, hands visible at his sides. His face was solemn, his dark eyes watching her with an intensity that made Sarah clutch the twins tighter. In that moment, as their gazes met across the yard, Sarah Williams knew her life would never be the same. Running Elk maintained his distance, recognizing the terror in the white woman's eyes. She stood in the doorway, swaying slightly from exhaustion. The two infants cradled awkwardly against her while she struggled to keep the rifle pointed in his direction. Her finger trembled on the trigger. One sudden movement, one misunderstanding, and she might fire. "My name Running Elk," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "War party comes soon. Many warriors. They burn all cabins, drive settlers away." "Why are you helping us?" The woman's voice was hoarse, suspicious. Running Elk considered his answer carefully. How could he explain the conflict that had been building in him for seasons? The weariness of endless blood, the memory of his own family lost to cavalry attacks, the teachings of his grandfather that had emphasized honor above vengeance. "Too much death," he said simply. "Children innocent, like stars, they have no part in wars of men." He gestured toward the forest behind the cabin. "There is place. Hidden cave, war party pass by, not see." "I take you there." The woman's eyes darted toward the tree line, then back to him. Fear and doubt warred on her face. "My husband." "No time," Running Elk said firmly. "Cannot help him now. Must save living." A sound in the distance made him stiffen, the distinctive call of a hawk, except no hawk made such a perfect, rhythmic cry. It was the signal of the Apache war party, alerting scouts of their approach. They were less than a mile away. "They come," he said urgently. "Decide now." The woman closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "I need things for the babies." "Quick," Running Elk agreed. "Very quick." He remained where he stood, knowing that entering the cabin would likely shatter the fragile trust forming between them. The woman disappeared inside, returning moments later with a bundle tied hastily in a blanket. The twins had begun to fuss, making small sounds of distress. "My name is Sarah," she said, as if offering her name was a final commitment to this desperate gamble. "Sarah Williams. These are James and Emma." Running Elk nodded in acknowledgement. "Come, stay close." He led her around the cabin toward the densest part of the forest. Sarah stumbled once, nearly falling with her precious burden. Without thinking, Running Elk reached out to steady her, his hand grasping her elbow. She flinched but didn't pull away, necessity overriding fear. They moved as quickly as possible through the underbrush, Running Elk choosing the path carefully, looking for firm ground that wouldn't hold their tracks. The twins were fully awake now, their cries growing louder despite Sarah's attempts to soothe them. "Cannot quiet them?" Running Elk asked, glancing back with concern. Sarah's face was pale with worry. "They're hungry and frightened." "Oh, I haven't been able to feed them properly since yesterday." Running Elk frowned, calculating distances and time. The cave was still 10 minutes away at their current pace. The war party would be reaching the settlement any moment. "Here," he said, stopping suddenly and holding out his arms. "I carry them. You follow." Sarah hesitated, clutching the twins protectively. The thought of handing her children to an Apache warrior clearly terrified her more than anything else that had happened. Another hawk call sounded, much closer now. "Please," Running Elk said, meeting her gaze steadily, "I swear on ancestors, no harm comes to them." Sarah searched his face, then slowly, reluctantly, transferred the bundled twins to his arms. Running Elk cradled them with practiced ease, surprising Sarah. "My sister's child," he explained. Seeing her expression, "I help care for him." With the babies secure against his chest, Running Elk increased their pace, moving through the forest with the silent efficiency that had made the Apache legendary scouts and warriors. Sarah followed, struggling to keep up, the bundle of supplies clutched tightly in her arms. The cave entrance was hidden behind a cascade of vines and brush, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Running Elk pushed aside the natural curtain and motioned Sarah inside. The space beyond was small but dry, with a narrow opening that allowed light to filter in from above. "Stay here," he instructed, gently returning the twins to Sarah's arms. "No fire, no sound if possible." "I return when safe." Sarah sank down against the cave wall, her legs finally giving out. "Where are you going?" "To protect you," Running Elk replied. "War party must not find tracks, must not suspect." Fear flashed across her face. "They'll kill you if they discover you've helped us," Running Elk nodded gravely. "Yes, but there is way, old lore of our people. Sometimes one warrior can claim protection over captured enemies. Sacred protection cannot be challenged without great dishonor. You would do that for strangers." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Running Elk looked at the twins, now whimpering softly in their mother's arms. Something stirred in his chest, a certainty, a purpose he hadn't felt since before the treaties began pushing his people into smaller and smaller territories. "Wait here," he repeated, avoiding her question. "And 3 sons at most." He slipped out of the cave, carefully arranging the vines to conceal the entrance once more. Then, with swift, deliberate movements, he began obscuring their trail, working his way back toward the settlement. As he neared the edge of the trees, smoke rose into the sky. The war party had arrived and had already set one of the cabins ablaze. Running Elk took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He had made his choice. Now he would have to face its consequences. Chief Ironhawk sat astride his horse at the center of the war party, watching impassively as warriors moved methodically through the settlement. 20 men had come, armed with rifles taken from cavalry soldiers in previous conflicts, as well as traditional bows and war clubs. They had found 2 cabins already destroyed, bodies already cooling in the dirt. "Raiders," Spotted Wolf spat, kicking at an abandoned hat lying in the mud. "They take what belongs to us." "What belongs to us is the land," Ironhawk corrected, his deep voice carrying authority earned through decades of leadership. "Not the possessions of white men." Running Elk approached openly, raising his hand in greeting. Ironhawk acknowledged him with a nod. "You were to report back before we arrived, Running Elk," the chief said, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "Two Hawks said you found something of interest." "Raiders came before us," Running Elk confirmed. 2 cabins destroyed. "And the third?" Ironhawk gestured toward Sarah's homestead, still untouched by the war party. Running Elk straightened his shoulders, meeting his chief's gaze directly. The moment of truth had arrived. "The third cabin holds one I have claimed under sacred protection," he said clearly, his voice carrying to all nearby warriors. "A woman and 2 infant children, no older than the moon cycles, since Brightwater's son was born." A shocked silence fell over the war party. Warriors exchanged glances, some puzzled, others angry. Ironhawk's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain yourself, son of Strong Bear," he said quietly. "What madness is this?" The silence that followed Running Elk's declaration hung heavy in the air, broken only by the crackling of flames from the burning cabin nearby. Warriors shifted uneasily, hands tightening on weapons. 2 Hawks, barely 18 summers old, looked at Running Elk with confusion and betrayal etched across his young face. "Sacred protection," Ironhawk repeated slowly, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. For a white settler. Running Elk stood firm, though he felt the weight of every eye upon him. For innocent children and their mother. The law of our ancestors makes no mention of skin color, only of innocence and mercy. Grey Wolf, the oldest warrior present and keeper of the tribe's oral history, urged his horse forward. His face was a map of wrinkles, his eyes clouded with age but sharp with wisdom. Running Elk speaks of ancient lore, Grey Wolf said, his voice thin but carrying. When Coyote still walked among men, he taught our forefathers that a warrior who finds innocence in battle may claim them under protection. His honor becomes their shield. "These are not innocents," Spotted Wolf shouted, jumping from his horse. At 35, he was one of the tribe's fiercest warriors, his body scarred from countless battles against both settlers and rival tribes. "They are thieves who take our hunting grounds, who bring soldiers with speaking sticks that kill our women and children." Murmurs of agreement rose from several warriors. Running Elk had expected this. Spotted Wolf had lost his wife and daughter to a cavalry attack the previous winter. His heart was consumed by vengeance, his judgment clouded by grief. "The woman has done nothing," Running Elk countered calmly. "Her husband lies dead by raiders' hands. Her children have not yet seen a full turning of seasons. Would you make war on babies, Spotted Wolf? Is that the honor of the Chiricahua?" Spotted Wolf's hand moved to his knife. "You question my honor. Enough." Ironhawk's command cut through the tension. He dismounted, walking slowly toward Running Elk, his steps measured and deliberate. Though past 50 winters, the chief moved with the fluid grace of a man half his age, his authority radiating from him like heat from fire. He stopped before Running Elk, searching his face. "Where is this woman and her children?" "Safe," Running Elk answered, "away from here." "You hid them from your own people?" Two Hawks asked, disbelief coloring his words. "And I protected them from war," Running Elk corrected, "as is my right under sacred law." Ironhawk circled Running Elk slowly, considering. "The law Grey Wolf speaks of is seldom invoked, not in my lifetime, nor my father's. It comes from days when we warred with Navajo and Comanche, not white settlers who breed like rabbits and devour land like locusts." "Yet the law remains," Running Elk said. "Unless we have abandoned the ways of our ancestors so completely that only those teachings that serve our anger are remembered." Several warriors inhaled sharply at this challenge. To question the tribe's adherence to tradition was a serious accusation. Ironhawk's eyes flashed, but he did not respond in anger. "Your father, Strong Bear, was my friend and ally," Ironhawk said instead. He died defending our people's right to live as they always have. What would he say of your choice today?" Running Elk felt the question like a physical blow. His father had been killed by cavalry soldiers 7 years earlier during a raid that had left 12 Apache dead, including women and children. The memory of his broken body still haunted Running Elk's dreams. "My father taught me that our ways must be preserved, even when difficult," he replied carefully. "That a warrior's honor is his greatest possession. He would understand that I cannot watch more innocent blood spilled, even if it flows through veins of a different color." Ironhawk studied him, then nodded once. "Show me this woman and her children." Spotted Wolf stepped forward. "Chief, you cannot consider I am chief," Ironhawk cut him off, "because I consider all things before deciding. The young warrior has invoked sacred law. We will see if his claim has merit." Running Elk hesitated. Taking Ironhawk to Sarah could put her in greater danger if the chief decided against him. Yet refusing would certainly doom his cause and possibly cost his life. "I will take you alone," he said finally. "Oh, the woman is frightened enough," A war party would terrify her. Ironhawk nodded in agreement. Grey Wolf will come as witness. The rest will make camp and await our return. Spotted Wolf's face darkened with anger. This is weakness. The settlers understand only strength and blood. Be careful, Spotted Wolf, Ironhawk warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. You question not just my decision, but the wisdom of our ancestors. Do you claim to know better than those who survived centuries before us? The warrior's jaw clenched, but he stepped back, lowering his eyes in reluctant submission. Running Elk felt a momentary relief, though he knew the danger was far from past. Grey Wolf dismounted with the careful movements of age, handing his reins to a younger warrior. Lead us, son of Strong Bear, the elder said, his rheumy eyes kind. I would see these children you deem worthy of such a rare protection. As Running Elk turned to lead them into the forest, he caught sight of two hawks watching him, confusion and disappointment evident in the young warrior's stance. The boy had looked up to Running Elk, had followed his example in hunting and tracking. Now he looked at him as if seeing a stranger. That hurt more than Spotted Wolf's anger or Ironhawk's questioning. But Running Elk forced himself to focus on what lay ahead, convincing his chief and the tribe's historian that his invocation of sacred protection was justified and honorable. As they disappeared into the trees, leaving the war party behind, Running Elk sent a silent prayer to the spirits of his ancestors. Everything now depended on what would happen when Ironhawk met Sarah Williams and her twin babies, a woman whose very presence on Apache lands represented everything the tribe had been fighting against for generations. Behind them, smoke continued to rise from the burning cabin, a black column against the morning sky that could be seen for miles, a signal that would draw attention from settlers and soldiers alike. Time, Running Elk knew, was not on their side. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Running Elk led Ironhawk and Grey Wolf through the tangled undergrowth. He had taken a circuitous route, partly to ensure they weren't followed by overzealous warriors like Spotted Wolf, and partly to give himself time to prepare for what lay ahead. The fate of Sarah and her children, and his own standing within the tribe, hung by the thinnest of threads. You doubt your decision, Grey Wolf observed quietly, his old eyes missing nothing despite their cloudiness. I see it in your steps. Running Elk glanced back. I doubt not the rightness of it, only how it will be received. By us, Ironhawk asked, or by the woman who now must face 3 Apache warriors in a cave where she has hidden in terror? The question gave Running Elk pause. He had been so focused on convincing his people that he had given little thought to how Sarah would react to their arrival. The fragile trust between them might shatter at the sight of more Apache men. We are near, he said instead of answering. She is alone with 2 hungry infants, afraid and grieving. Approach with care. Ironhawk's expression hardened. You instruct me on how to behave, Running Elk. I remind us all what fear can do, Running Elk replied evenly, even to the bravest heart. Grey Wolf nodded approvingly. Wisdom from one so young. Your grandfather speaks through you today. They reached the hidden cave entrance, the vines and brush appearing undisturbed since Running Elk's departure. He moved forward alone, pushing aside the natural curtain slightly. Sarah Williams, he called softly. I have returned. I bring my chief and our elder. They come to see the ones I have claimed for protection. Silence greeted him. For a moment, Running Elk feared she had fled. But where could she go, with 2 infants and raiders still possibly in the area? Sarah, he called again, concern creeping into his voice. Step back, came her reply finally, her voice trembling but determined. All of you, step back from the entrance. Running Elk glanced at Iron Hawk, who raised an eyebrow but nodded. The three men retreated several paces from the cave mouth. The vines parted, and Sarah emerged, blinking in the dappled sunlight. She held her rifle awkwardly in one arm, the twins secured in a makeshift sling across her chest. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her eyes red-rimmed, but her jaw was set in determination. Grey Wolf inhaled sharply, his gnarled hand rising to touch the medicine pouch at his neck. "The vision," he murmured, in Apache, just as the dream showed. Iron Hawk shot him a questioning look, but the elder shook his head slightly, indicating they would speak of it later. Sarah's eyes darted between the three men, the rifle barrel wavering. "You said you were bringing your chief," she said to Running Elk. "Which one is he?" Running Elk gestured toward Iron Hawk. "This is Chief Iron Hawk of the Chiricahua Apache, and this is Grey Wolf, our tribe's keeper of history and wisdom." Sarah swallowed visibly, her grip tightening on the rifle. One of the twins, Emma, Running Elk thought, began to fuss, making small, hungry sounds that seemed impossibly loud in the tense silence. Iron Hawk studied Sarah for a long moment, his face impassive. Then, to Running Elk's surprise, the chief slowly lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the forest floor, a gesture that put him below Sarah's eye level and removed any sense of threat. "Your children are hungry," Iron Hawk said in careful English. "You are tired, we talk, but first you tend to little ones." The unexpected compassion seemed to catch Sarah off guard. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears born of exhaustion and relief. I don't have much milk," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Not enough food, not enough sleep." Grey Wolf moved forward, his movements slow and deliberate, as befitted his age. "Medicine," he said, reaching into the pouch at his belt and producing a small packet wrapped in leaves. "For mother, make milk strong, good for babies." Sarah looked to Running Elk, uncertainty written across her face. "Grey Wolf knows many plants," Running Elk explained. "His medicines are respected by all tribes. This one is given to our women after childbirth." Still hesitant, Sarah lowered her rifle slightly. "Why would you help me? Your people came to burn our homes, to drive us out." Iron Hawk's eyes narrowed, but he answered truthfully. "Yes, this was our purpose. Still may be. But Running Elk has claimed ancient protection for you and your children. We come to judge if his claim is honorable. And if you decide it isn't," Sarah challenged, fear giving her courage, "then matters become difficult," Iron Hawk replied. Grey Wolf held out the packet of herbs again. "Tea, steep in hot water, drink, help babies." Sarah finally relented, tucking the rifle under her arm to accept the medicine with her free hand. "Thank you," she said softly. The elder nodded, a gentle smile crinkling his weathered face. "Children are gifts from Creator, all children." Sarah's composure finally broke at this simple kindness. A tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another. Emma's fussing grew louder, and James joined in, their tiny faces reddening with hunger and distress. Running Elk moved toward the cave entrance. "We should go inside, too exposed here." Iron Hawk rose fluidly to his feet. "Yes. And we must talk, Sarah Williams, about what happens now, about why Running Elk risks much to protect you." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, straightening her shoulders. "I don't understand any of this," she admitted. "Why he helped us, why you're even listening instead of just—" She couldn't finish the thought. "Understanding comes with time," Grey Wolf said, following Running Elk toward the cave. "First comes trust. Small seeds, but they grow strong with care." As they disappeared into the cave's shadows, Iron Hawk lingered a moment, looking back toward the direction of the settlement where his warriors waited. His expression was troubled, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. Then he too ducked into the cave, leaving the sunlit forest empty once more. Inside the cave, a small fire now burned, carefully tended to produce minimal smoke that dissipated through the narrow opening above. Running Elk had insisted on it, seeing how Sarah trembled despite the day's growing warmth. Grey Wolf had approved, saying the sacred conversation to come required fire's presence. Sarah sat with her back against the cave wall, the twins finally quiet after nursing. The herbal tea Grey Wolf had prepared had worked remarkably quickly, bringing her milk back despite days of stress and poor nutrition. Now Emma and James slept peacefully in her lap, their tiny faces relaxed for the first time since Running Elk had found them. Iron Hawk sat across the fire from her, his expression thoughtful as he studied the small family. Running Elk stood near the cave entrance, dividing his attention between the forest outside and the conversation within. Grey Wolf knelt beside the fire, occasionally adding small twigs from the bundle he'd gathered, murmuring quiet prayers with each addition. "Your husband," Iron Hawk said finally, breaking the contemplative silence. "Well, he was killed by raiders, not by Apache." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway, pain flashing across her face. "Thomas went to check our perimeter. They shot him without warning. 3 men on horseback." "You saw them?" Running Elk asked, turning from his watch. "Yes, they tried to break into the cabin afterward. I fired warning shots. They left before dawn yesterday, but I was afraid to leave in case they were waiting." Iron Hawk exchanged a glance with Grey Wolf. "These raiders, describe them?" Sarah closed her eyes, remembering. One was tall, with a long beard. Another had a scar across his face. Here, she traced a line from her left temple to her jaw. The third wore a cavalry hat, but he wasn't a soldier. Too dirty, too wild-looking. Running Elk stiffened. "Would you the Johnson gang?" he said in Apache to Iron Hawk. "The same who attacked the trading post at Eagle Creek last season, killed 4 of our people." Iron Hawk nodded grimly. "They respect no boundaries, no laws, not white laws, not Indian laws, just their own greed." "You know them?" Sarah asked, catching the exchange though she couldn't understand the words. "Bad men," Grey Wolf explained, looking up from the fire. "Known to both your people and ours. They take, they kill, they burn." "Why is this important?" Sarah asked, unconsciously drawing the twins closer to her chest. Iron Hawk leaned forward. "Because, Sarah Williams, it means we have common enemy." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Also means your husband's blood is not on Apache hands. Makes Running Elk's claim of protection cleaner. I still don't understand this protection he keeps talking about," Sarah said, glancing at Running Elk. "What does it mean? What happens now?" Grey Wolf raised a hand, the firelight casting long shadows from his gnarled fingers against the cave wall. "I will explain, but first I must speak of the vision." Iron Hawk's eyes narrowed, but he nodded for the elder to continue. Running Elk moved closer, curious. The elder had mentioned a vision earlier, but had not elaborated. Grey Wolf reached into his medicine pouch, extracting a small object wrapped in soft leather. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a carved stone figurine no larger than a child's thumb, a woman holding 2 small bundles. "3 moons ago," Grey Wolf began, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a storyteller, "I sought guidance from the ancestors about the growing conflict with the white settlers. I fasted for 4 days, took sacred medicine, and climbed to the speaking rocks where the spirits of voices are strongest." He held up the small carving so that the firelight illuminated it fully. There I was given this vision, a woman with hair the color of summer grass, cradling two new lives against the storm. Behind her stood a warrior of our people, his hand raised not in threat but in protection, and around them both, a circle of light that pushed back darkness. Sarah stared at the carving, then at Grey Wolf, disbelief written across her face. That could mean anything. Any woman with two children? Twins are rare, Grey Wolf replied simply. A white woman with twin infants, even rarer. And one protected by an Apache warrior? He shook his head. The vision was specific. I carved this afterward, to remember. Running Elk moved closer, examining the small figurine with wonder. You never spoke of this vision to the council. Some visions are not for sharing until their time has come, Grey Wolf replied. The spirits do not always show us what we expect or what we wish to see. Ironhawk frowned, clearly troubled by this revelation. You believe this woman and her children are the ones from your vision. I know they are, Grey Wolf said with quiet certainty, as does your heart, Ironhawk, though your mind still resists. The chief's frown deepened, but he did not contradict the elder. Instead, he turned to Sarah. The protection Running Elk offers is ancient custom. A warrior may claim those captured in battle as under his personal guard if he believes they are innocent or have special purpose. It is rarely done. The last time was before my birth, when White Feather claimed protection over a Navajo medicine woman who had healed his son. I'm not captured in battle, Sarah pointed out. Moy and I have no special skills or purpose. Grey Wolf held up the carving again. The vision says otherwise. But what does this protection mean for us? Sarah pressed, looking between the three men. Can we go back to our cabin? Running Elk shook his head. Cabin is burned. War Party would have destroyed it after we left. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this new loss. Then where? You can't expect us to live in a cave. If protection is accepted by the council, Ironhawk explained, you would come to our camp, live among our people. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. As prisoners, as... Ironhawk searched for the right word. As guests, under Running Elk's protection and responsibility. And if I refuse? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A heavy silence fell over the cave. Finally, Ironhawk spoke, his voice solemn. Then we cannot guarantee your safety. Other settlers will blame Apache for the raid. Soldiers will come. There will be more bloodshed. You're saying I have no choice, Sarah concluded bitterly. There is always choice, Running Elk said, moving to kneel beside her. But sometimes, all choices are difficult. Sarah looked down at her sleeping twins, their faces peaceful and untroubled by the weight of decisions being made around them. How could I possibly live among people who were ready to kill us just hours ago? How could I trust that my children would be safe? Because I will be there, Running Elk said simply. Because I have given my word. Your word got you into trouble with your own people, Sarah pointed out. What happens when they decide they don't want us there after all? Grey Wolf chuckled softly. She has warrior's mind, this one. Sees dangers ahead. Ironhawk nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. The council must approve Running Elk's claim. Not all will agree. Spotted Wolf and others have lost much to white men. Their hearts are filled with anger. But if Grey Wolf's vision is accepted, Running Elk added, many will see the spirit's hand in this meeting. The cave fell silent again, save for the soft crackling of the fire and the occasional sleepy sound from one of the twins. Sarah looked from her children to the cave entrance, as if measuring the dangerous world that lay beyond. What about other settlers? She asked finally. If I disappear with my children, they'll think we were killed. They'll blame your people. Yes, Ironhawk agreed. This is problem. Also, soldiers will search when settlers are missing. Running Elk's expression darkened. The Johnson gang takes captives sometimes, sells them in Mexico. If tracks show raiders took you south, you want to make it look like we were kidnapped by the same men who killed Thomas, Sarah realized. And lead the soldiers away from your people, Running Elk nodded. It would give us time for council to decide, for you to learn our ways, for vision to become clear. Sarah fell silent, considering. Then James stirred in her lap, his tiny hand grasping at air before settling again. She touched his cheek gently. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said finally, looking up at Running Elk. "Yes, but my husband is dead. My home is destroyed, and my children need protection. I have nowhere else to go." She straightened her shoulders, a flash of the same determination that had kept her defending her cabin for days returning to her eyes. "If I agree to this, I want your word, all of you, that my children will be safe, that they will never be harmed because of what they are or where they come from." Ironhawk regarded her thoughtfully, then nodded once. "If council accepts claim of protection, no harm will come to you or your children while under our care. This I swear as chief, as do I, as elder and keeper of visions," Grey Wolf added solemnly. Running Elk met Sarah's gaze steadily. "I have already given my word. My life for yours, if needed." Outside the cave, a bird call pierced the afternoon quiet, but not a natural call. It was the signal Running Elk had arranged with two hawks before departing. The young warrior was warning them that something approached. Running Elk moved swiftly to the cave entrance, peering through the vines, his body tensed. "Riders," he said tersely. "White men, armed. Coming this way." Running Elk's announcement sent a jolt of fear through the cave. Sarah instinctively gathered the twins closer, while Ironhawk moved silently to join Running Elk at the entrance, peering through the vines. "6 riders," Ironhawk murmured in Apache, "armed with rifles, searching, not riding through. They look for survivors," Running Elk agreed. "Or revenge." Sarah shifted the sleeping twins to her shoulders and crawled toward them. "Let me see," she whispered. The men parted slightly, allowing her to look. Through gaps in the foliage, she could make out riders moving slowly through the forest below, their horses picking carefully among the undergrowth. They were about half a mile distant, but heading in their general direction. "I recognize them," she said, her voice tight. "The one in front is Michael Carson. He owns the largest ranch in the valley. The others are neighbors." She paused, swallowing hard. "Friends of Thomas." Grey Wolf joined them, moving with surprising stealth despite his age. "If they find us, there will be blood," he said softly. "Too many guns, too much fear between our peoples. We must lead them away," Running Elk decided. "Create false trail." Ironhawk nodded in agreement. "The woman and children stay here with Grey Wolf. You and I will draw the settlers south, toward the river crossing, make them think raiders went that way with captives." Sarah pulled back from the entrance, her face pale but determined. "No, if they're searching, they'll check every cave, every ravine. They're experienced trackers. They'll find us eventually." "What do you suggest?" Ironhawk asked, a hint of challenge in his voice. Sarah hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Let me speak to them." The 3 Apache men stared at her in surprise. "I'll tell them I escaped from the raiders," she continued quickly, "that I saw them heading south. I'll say I'm waiting for my brother to come from Fort Collins to take us there." She looked directly at Running Elk. "I won't betray you. But this way, they'll stop searching and focus on the raiders instead." Running Elk studied her face intently. Why would you do this? Help us escape. Because you saved my children when you could have let us die, she answered simply. Because I've seen enough bloodshed, she glanced down at the twins, and because whatever happens next, I need to make peace with my neighbors before I disappear. Ironhawk's eyes narrowed. How do we know you will not tell them about us? You don't, Sarah admitted. You'll have to trust me, just as I'm trusting you with my future and my children's lives. Grey Wolf placed a gnarled hand on Ironhawk's arm. The vision shows truth in her heart. The chief was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he gave a curt nod. But not alone. Too dangerous. I will go with her, Running Elk said. Stay hidden. Watch over her. No, Sarah objected. If they see any sign of Apache, they'll assume the worst. They need to see only me, a mother with her children, clearly unharmed. And if they decide to take you with them? Running Elk asked, unable to keep concern from his voice. I'll refuse. Say I'm waiting for my brother, as planned. She managed a grim smile. I kept raiders at bay for 2 days. I can handle Michael Carson for 10 minutes. Ironhawk exchanged a look with Running Elk, an unspoken communication passing between them. Then the chief nodded again. We will be close. Watching, first sign of danger. We come. Sarah rose shakily to her feet, adjusting the twins in her arms. I need to look. She glanced down at her dirty, blood-stained dress. I less like I've been hiding in a cave. Grey Wolf reached into his medicine pouch and produced a small container of red ochre. For your cheeks, he explained. Color of life. Make you look stronger. Sarah allowed the elder to apply a light touch of the pigment to her pale cheeks. Running Elk found her discarded blanket bundle and brought it to her. Anything you need? He asked. Sarah rummaged through it one-handed, producing a brush. She quickly ran it through her tangled blonde hair, then splashed a little water from her canteen on her face, washing away the worst of the dirt. It was a hasty attempt at normality, but it made a difference. My rifle, she said. Running Elk frowned. If you carry weapon, a woman alone in the wilderness without a rifle would make no sense to them, Sarah interrupted. They know I know how to use it. Thomas made sure of that. Reluctantly, Running Elk handed her the Winchester. Sarah checked it was loaded, then tucked it under her arm. Stay here until I call for you, she instructed. If something goes wrong. She hesitated, looking at the sleeping faces of Emma and James. Take care of them, please. Running Elk nodded solemnly. On my life. Sarah took a deep breath and moved toward the cave entrance. Running Elk caught her arm gently as she passed. Be careful, he said softly. These men may be your friends, but they are angry. Grief and anger make men unpredictable. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. A moment of understanding, of shared concern that went beyond their brief acquaintance. I know, she whispered. Outside, the riders were drawing closer, now perhaps a quarter-mile away. Sarah positioned herself on a small outcropping where she would be visible from below, the twins cradled in one arm, the rifle held loosely in the other. Then she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the afternoon air. Michael, up here! It's Sarah Williams! The riders reined in sharply, heads turning toward the sound. The lead rider, a broad-shouldered man with a thick moustache, shaded his eyes against the sun. Sarah, he called back in disbelief. My God, is that really you? Inside the cave, the 3 Apache warriors watched through the concealing vines as Sarah began the performance that might save or doom them all. Ironhawk glanced at Running Elk, noting the intensity with which the younger warrior watched the white woman, the concern evident in his tense posture. "You have chosen a difficult path, son of Strong Bear," the chief murmured. "A word for all of us." Running Elk did not reply, his attention fixed on Sarah as she stood alone against the sky, her slender figure somehow appearing both vulnerable and indomitable as she faced her own people with a deception that would change her life forever. Michael Carson dismounted quickly, handing his reins to the rider beside him. He scrambled up the rocky slope towards Sarah, his weathered face a mixture of relief and disbelief. The other men remained on horseback, rifles ready, eyes scanning the surrounding forest with suspicion. "We found Thomas," Michael said as he reached her, his voice thick with emotion. "And the Burkett family. We thought you and the little ones were—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Sarah swallowed hard, the grief in his eyes making her deception more painful. These were good men, neighbors who had helped raise her cabin, who had brought food when the twins were born, who had stood with Thomas through drought and blizzard alike. "Raiders," she said, the word catching in her throat. "3 of them. They killed Thomas while he was checking the perimeter." The truth, at least, came easily. "I barricaded myself in the cabin with the twins, kept them at bay with the rifle until they left." Michael glanced at the weapon tucked under her arm, nodding in grim approval. "Thomas always said you were a better shot than half the men in the valley." One of the riders called up from below. "Any sign of Indians, Mrs. Williams? We found tracks near your property." "Apache, by the look of them." "In the cave." Running Elk tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his knife. Iron Hawk placed a restraining hand on his arm, his eyes never leaving the scene outside. "No," Sarah replied firmly. "Just the raiders. I saw them heading south yesterday at dawn, toward the river crossing." Michael studied her face. "What are you doing up here, Sarah?" "Why didn't you come to the ranch?" Sarah adjusted the twins in her arms, buying a moment to steady her voice. "I was afraid the raiders might return. The cave seemed safer. And—" She hesitated, then continued with the lie she had prepared. "I sent word to my brother in Fort Collins before everything happened, asked him to visit. He should be arriving any day now. I thought it best to wait here, where he'll look for me." "John's coming?" Michael asked, referring to Sarah's older brother. "That's good. You shouldn't be alone after what happened." He glanced at the cave entrance behind her. "But you can't stay here. Come back with us. Margaret will look after you and the little ones until John arrives." Sarah shook her head. "Thank you, Michael, but no, I need time. And I promised Thomas I'd wait for John here." She gestured toward the cave. "I have supplies. The twins are well. We'll be fine for a few days." Michael frowned, clearly unconvinced. "At least let me leave Simmons with you." He nodded toward one of the riders. "For protection?" "No," Sarah said, too quickly. She softened her tone. "I mean, there's barely room for me and the twins in there. And you'll need every man if you're going after the raiders." Michael's expression hardened. "We intend to. Those murdering bastards won't get away with this." "Be careful," Sarah said, genuine concern in her voice. "They're dangerous men." Michael nodded grimly. "We'll send word to the fort as well. The cavalry will want to know about this attack." He hesitated. "Are you sure you won't come with us, Sarah?" "It doesn't feel right, leaving you here." Sarah managed a small smile. "I've survived this long, haven't I? A few more days won't make a difference. Go find the men who killed Thomas. That's what matters now." Reluctantly, Michael reached out and squeezed her shoulder. "We'll check on you tomorrow, and when John arrives, bring him to the ranch. You both will always have a place with us." Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. This was goodbye, though Michael didn't know it. She would never see these men again, Never sit at Margaret Carson's table listening to their stories. Never watch her children grow up alongside their own. Michael turned to go, then paused. Thomas was a good man, Sarah. One of the best I've known. We'll make sure he's properly buried. I promise you that. Thank you, Sarah whispered, tears spilling despite her efforts to contain them. Michael made his way back down to the waiting riders. After a brief consultation, they turned their horses south in the direction Sarah had indicated. She watched them go, standing motionless on the outcropping until they disappeared from view, taking with them the last vestiges of her old life. Only when they were completely gone did she allow her shoulders to slump, the weight of what she had done settling heavily upon her. Running Elk emerged from the cave, moving quietly to stand beside her. He did not speak, but his presence offered a silent support that Sarah found herself grateful for. "They're good men," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "They don't deserve to be lied to." "You protected them as much as us," Running Elk replied. "If they had found us, there would be more widows tonight." Sarah looked down at the sleeping twins. "Will my children ever understand why I did this? Will they forgive me for taking them away from their own people?" Running Elk considered this, his dark eyes thoughtful. "They will know their mother chose life over hatred." "There is honor in that choice." Ironhawk and Grey Wolf joined them, the chief scanning the horizon with sharp eyes. "We must go," he said. "Others from War Party will be searching for us by now." Grey Wolf approached Sarah, his ancient face kind. "The path ahead is not easy, daughter of another people, but remember, the vision showed light, not darkness, hope, not despair." Sarah nodded, squaring her shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now we journey to our camp," Ironhawk replied. 3 days' travel. The council will hear Running Elk's claim and my testimony. They will decide." "And until then?" Sarah asked. Running Elk stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Until then, you and your children are under my protection. No harm will come to you." "This I swear." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something there that gave her courage, a steadfastness, a certainty that seemed unshakable. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. As they gathered what few supplies remained and prepared to leave the cave, Sarah took one last look in the direction her neighbors had gone. Then she turned away, facing the unknown path that stretched before her into the heart of what had once been enemy territory. The journey to the Apache camp tested Sarah in ways she hadn't imagined possible. 3 days of travel through terrain increasingly unfamiliar and forbidding, steep ravines, narrow passes between towering rock formations, forests that gave way to arid plateaus where the sun beat down mercilessly. Each night, her muscles ached from hours of walking while carrying the twins, despite Running Elk's offers to help bear their weight. They traveled in silence for much of the journey, Ironhawk leading the way with Grey Wolf close behind. Their pace adjusted to accommodate Sarah's endurance. Running Elk remained at her side, occasionally pointing out landmarks or offering quiet warnings about treacherous footing. Twice they stopped to replenish water supplies at hidden springs, known only to the Apache, places of surprising beauty amid the harsh landscape. By the second day, Sarah had reluctantly accepted Running Elk's help with the twins. He fashioned a carrier from deerskin and strips of cloth, similar to what Apache women used, enabling her to rest her arms while keeping the babies secure against her chest. The gesture was practical, yet the care with which he constructed it spoke of something more than mere efficiency. "My sister carried her son this way," he explained, as he showed her how to adjust the straps. She said it kept him close to her heart, where he could hear the same rhythms he knew before birth. Sarah watched his hands work with surprising gentleness, noticing the contrast between the warrior's calluses and the delicate movements of his fingers. "You speak of your sister often," she observed. "You must be close." A shadow passed over Running Elk's face. "She died 2 winters ago. Fever took her after soldiers burned our village. Her son lives, raised by our cousin Morning Star." "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly, understanding his loss in a way she wouldn't have before Thomas's death. "What was her name?" "Swift Deer," he replied, his voice warming at the memory. "Because she could outrun all the children, even the boys. She was fearless." "Like her brother," Sarah said without thinking. Running Elk looked up, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. Their gazes held for a moment before he returned to his work, but something had shifted between them, a small acknowledgement of mutual respect, perhaps even admiration. On the 3rd day, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Ironhawk led them to a high ridge overlooking a sheltered valley. Below, nestled against the base of a towering red cliff, lay the Apache camp, dozens of wickiups constructed of brush and hides, arranged in a loose circle. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and figures moved about the central area. Children played near the edges of a small stream that cut through the valley, their laughter carrying faintly on the breeze. "Our people," Ironhawk said simply, gesturing toward the encampment. Sarah felt a surge of anxiety as she looked down at the scene. Until now, the reality of where she was going, of what she had committed herself and her children to, had been abstract, secondary to the immediate challenges of the journey. But seeing the Apache camp spread before her made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "They will not all welcome you," Running Elk said quietly, reading her expression. "Some will be curious, others afraid, a few hostile, but none will harm you while you are under my protection." "And after the council decides?" Sarah asked, voicing the fear that had grown with each step of their journey. "We must trust in the wisdom of the elders," Grey Wolf interjected, "and in the vision that brought us together." Ironhawk's expression remained inscrutable as he surveyed the camp. "And we should arrive before full dark," he said. "I will speak to the council tonight. They will meet tomorrow to hear Running Elk's claim." They descended the ridge in single file, Ironhawk still leading. As they neared the camp, figures began to notice their approach. A warning call went up, and several warriors moved to the perimeter, hands on weapons. Then recognition dawned. Their chief returned, and the alarm subsided, only to be replaced by confusion and tension as they spotted Sarah and the twins. Word spread quickly. By the time they reached the edge of the camp, what seemed like the entire tribe had gathered to witness their arrival. Sarah felt dozens of eyes upon her, some curious, others openly hostile. She kept her gaze steady, though her heart pounded painfully in her chest. A tall woman stepped forward from the crowd, her bearing regal, her face lined with age and authority. Her long grey hair was braided with strips of red cloth, and she wore a doe-skin dress adorned with elaborate beadwork. This, Sarah realized, must be a person of importance, perhaps Ironhawk's wife or another elder. The woman spoke rapidly in Apache, her tone questioning. Ironhawk replied with equal speed, gesturing toward Running Elk and then to Sarah and the twins. The woman's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed as she studied Sarah more intently. "This is Dove Singer," Grey Wolf explained to Sarah. "She is head of the Women's Council and Ironhawk's sister. A powerful voice among our people." Dove Singer approached Sarah slowly, her dark eyes missing nothing, not the twins, fair hair peeking from their wrappings, nor the rifle still slung across Sarah's back, nor the exhaustion evident in her stance. Without warning, she reached out and touched one of the twins' cheeks. Emma stirred at the contact but didn't wake. "So small," Dovesinger said in halting English. "Why bring them here? Why not leave with own kind?" The directness of the question caught Sarah off guard. She looked to Running Elk, who nodded encouragingly. "My husband is dead," Sarah replied, finding strength in the simple truth. "Our home is destroyed. Running Elk saved us when others would have killed us. I had nowhere else to go." Dovesinger considered this, then spoke again in Apache to her brother. Iron Hawk responded, his tone firm but respectful. The exchange continued for several minutes, the crowd watching in tense silence. Finally, Dovesinger turned back to Sarah. "You stay in Running Elk's lodge tonight," she said. "Tomorrow, council decides." She paused, then added with unexpected gentleness, "Children need food, clean wrappings. Come." She turned and walked toward the center of the camp, clearly expecting Sarah to follow. Running Elk nodded encouragingly. "Dovesinger is respected by all," he said quietly. "Her acceptance, even temporary, is important." Sarah took a deep breath and followed the Apache woman, acutely aware of the stares that tracked her movement through the camp. Children darted closer for a better look, only to be pulled back by cautious mothers. Young warriors watched with suspicion, while older men and women observed with inscrutable expressions. Running Elk's lodge was larger than most, positioned near the center of the camp. Inside, furs covered the ground, and various possessions, weapons, tools, clothing, were arranged neatly along the walls. A small fire pit occupied the center, currently cold. Dovesinger gestured for Sarah to sit, then left briefly, returning with several other women. They brought food, a stew of rabbit and wild greens, fresh bread, dried berries, and clean cloths for the twins. One young woman carried a clay pot of warm water and a bundle of herbs. "For washing," she explained shyly in broken English. "Good for babies." Sarah's throat tightened with unexpected emotion at this small kindness. "Thank you," she managed. The women helped her bathe the twins, who had awakened hungry and fussy. Their gentle handling of James and Emma, their soft exclamations over tiny fingers and toes, transcended the barriers of language and culture. For a moment, they were simply women caring for infants, a universal act that required no translation. After the twins were fed and settled, and Sarah had eaten her first proper meal in days, the women departed, leaving only Dovesinger behind. The older woman sat across the fire pit from Sarah, her expression thoughtful. "Running Elk risks much for you," she said finally. "His position in tribe, his honor, perhaps his life." Sarah looked up sharply. "His life? I don't understand." "Spotted Wolf and others challenge his claim," Dovesinger explained. "Say he betrays Apache ways. If council rejects claim of protection." She drew a finger across her throat in a universal gesture. Horror washed over Sarah. "They would kill him, their own warrior. Tribal law is clear. To betray people is death." Dovesinger's gaze was penetrating. "He knew this when he helped you." Before Sarah could respond, the lodge flap opened and Running Elk entered. He nodded respectfully to Dovesinger, who rose to her feet. "Care for them well, nephew," she said in Apache, though her glance at Sarah suggested she knew the white woman wouldn't understand. "Their fate is now tied to yours, for good or ill." After she had gone, Running Elk knelt beside the fire pit, arranging kindling and striking flint to steel to bring warmth to the cooling evening air. Sarah watched him work, Dovesinger's words echoing in her mind. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "About the risk to yourself." Running Elk continued building the fire, not meeting her eyes. "Would it have changed your decision?" "Yes," Sarah exclaimed. "I would never have agreed to put your life in danger." "Then it is good I did not tell you," he replied simply. The fire caught, sending a warm glow throughout the lodge. In its light, Sarah could see the determination in Running Elk's profile, the quiet strength that had drawn her to trust him from their first encounter. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why risk everything for us?" Running Elk finally looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Because there must be an end to the cycle of vengeance. Because your children deserve life. Because," he hesitated, searching for words, "because when I found you in that cabin, I saw courage I respected, and I could not watch it die." Outside, the sounds of the camp settled into evening rhythms, muted conversations, a distant drum, the laughter of children being called to bed. Inside the lodge, something unspoken hung in the air between them, fragile as morning mist, but just as real. "Rest now," Running Elk said, breaking the spell. "Tomorrow will test us all," Sarah nodded, gathering the sleeping twins close as she stretched out on the furs. Running Elk remained by the fire, his silhouette strong and watchful against the lodge wall. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Sarah's last conscious thought was a prayer, not to the God of her childhood, but to whatever powers might be listening, that she would not be the cause of this good man's destruction. Dawn broke over the Apache camp in a blaze of amber and gold. Sarah awoke to find Running Elk already gone, the fire rekindled, and a small pot of tea steeping beside it. The twins slept peacefully on the furs beside her, their faces relaxed in the innocence of dreams, untouched by the day's impending judgment. Outside, the camp hummed with unusual activity. Sarah peered through the lodge flap to see people gathering in the central clearing, where a circle of stones had been arranged around a larger fire pit. Elders sat on blankets spread along one side, their faces solemn. Warriors stood in groups, talking in low voices, while women and children gathered behind them, a living perimeter of watchful eyes. Dove Singer appeared at the lodge entrance, startling Sarah with her silent approach. The older woman carried a bundle of clothing, a simple dress of soft deer skin, decorated with modest beadwork along the neckline. "For counsel," she explained, offering the garment. "Clean, proper." Sarah accepted it hesitantly. "Thank you. But why?" "You appear before elders today," Dove Singer interrupted, "with Running Elk. Better to show respect in our ways." As Sarah changed into the dress, marveling at how well it fit, Dove Singer helped prepare the twins. She produced a salve of crushed herbs and bear fat, applying it gently to their skin. "Protects from sun," she explained, "keeps spirits close." Sarah watched the woman's weathered hands move with practiced care over her children's delicate skin. "You've been kind to us," she said quietly. "Not everyone would be..." Dove Singer's eyes met hers briefly. "I lost daughter to white soldiers," she said, her voice even, "and granddaughter, spotted wolf, lost wife and child. Many here carry such wounds. Then why help us at all?" The older woman was silent for a moment, her fingers continuing their gentle work. "Grey wolf's vision," she said finally, "and Running Elk's heart. Both strong medicine." She finished with the twins and straightened. "It is time." Sarah gathered her children, one in each arm, and followed Dove Singer from the lodge. As they approached the council circle, the buzz of conversation died away, replaced by a heavy silence. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of stares, some curious, others openly hostile. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on the far side of the circle where Running Elk stood beside Ironhawk and Grey Wolf. Spotted Wolf stood opposite them, his stance aggressive, surrounded by several younger warriors whose expressions mirrored his obvious displeasure. The tension between the two groups was palpable, like lightning waiting to strike. Dovesinger led Sarah to the center of the circle, then moved to join the other women. Sarah stood alone with her children, feeling terribly exposed, yet somehow strengthened by the simple dignity of the dress she wore and the precious weight of the twins in her arms. Grey Wolf rose to his feet, raising his arms toward the sky. He spoke in Apache, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, their ritualistic cadence needed no translation. This was an invocation, a calling to witness. Ironhawk stepped forward next, addressing the council in their language. His speech was longer, more measured, punctuated by gestures towards Sarah and Running Elk. Several times, elders nodded or murmured in response. When he finished, he motioned Running Elk forward. Running Elk stood tall, his voice steady as he spoke. Though his words remained a mystery to Sarah, she recognized her name and those of her children interspersed throughout his address. Occasionally, his hand would move to his heart or extend toward her in a gesture that somehow conveyed both protection and respect. When he finished, Spotted Wolf strode into the center of the circle, his face contorted with barely contained rage. His speech was sharper, more impassioned, his gestures slashing through the air like knife blades. Several times, warriors behind him called out in support, their voices hard with conviction. Grey Wolf responded, producing the small carved figure that had represented his vision. He held it up for all to see, turning slowly to ensure every member of the tribe could witness it. Then he approached Sarah, placing the carving in her free hand and closing her fingers gently around it. "Speak now," he whispered in English, "from your heart. For your children." Sarah looked at the assembled tribe, at faces that had known generations of conflict with her people, at eyes that had witnessed loved ones fall to settler guns and cavalry sabers. What could she possibly say to bridge such a divide? She looked down at James and Emma, their faces turned toward her, tiny hands grasping at the air. Then she raised her eyes, meeting the gaze of each elder in turn, before finally looking directly at Spotted Wolf. "I cannot speak your language," she began, her voice trembling slightly before growing stronger. "I cannot understand your words, but I understand loss. I understand pain." She shifted the twins in her arms, displaying them more prominently. "And I understand love." Ironhawk translated her words in short phrases, allowing them to reach every ear. "My husband is dead. My home is destroyed. All I have left are my children and the chance Running Elk has given us." She paused, looking toward the warrior who had risked everything for her. "I did not ask to be saved. I did not expect mercy from those I had been taught to fear. But it was given freely, with honor and compassion." She turned back to Spotted Wolf, whose expression remained hard as stone. "I know you have lost those you love to my people. Nothing I say can heal that wound. Nothing can bring them back." Her voice caught, "just as nothing will bring Thomas back to me or give my children the father they deserve." She held up the carved figure Grey Wolf had given her. But this vision of protection instead of vengeance, of life instead of death, offers something different. Not forgetting, not forgiveness, if that's too much to ask, but a chance to break the cycle that has claimed too many lives on both sides. The camp had fallen utterly silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "If you allow us to stay," Sarah continued, "I will learn your ways. I will teach my children to respect your traditions. I will work alongside your women and contribute to your tribe. And perhaps, in time, you will see us not as enemies to be feared or hated, but as people who share your grief, your hopes, your humanity." As Ironhawk translated her final words, a murmur ran through the assembly. Grey Wolf stepped forward, addressing the council again, his gnarled finger pointing first at Sarah, then at Running Elk, then sweeping to encompass the entire tribe. Spotted Wolf remained unmoved. When Grey Wolf finished, he strode towards Sarah, stopping barely an arm's length away. His eyes burned with intensity as he studied her face, then the faces of her children. James chose that moment to wake fully, blinking up at the strange man looming over him. Instead of crying, the infant simply stared, one tiny hand reaching upward. Something flickered in Spotted Wolf's expression, a crack in the stone facade, quickly suppressed, but not before Sarah glimpsed the pain beneath his anger. Without warning, he turned away, addressing the council in sharp, clipped phrases. Running Elk moved to Sarah's side, his expression grave. "He challenges my claim," he explained quietly, "demands proof of worthiness." "What kind of proof?" Sarah asked, alarmed. Before Running Elk could answer, Ironhawk stepped between them, facing Spotted Wolf. The chief spoke firmly, his authority evident in every syllable. The challenger responded heatedly, gesturing towards Sarah and the twins with obvious disdain. The exchange continued, growing more intense. Other warriors began to call out, some supporting Spotted Wolf, others defending Running Elk. The atmosphere grew charged with the potential for violence. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the clamor, a woman's voice, strong and clear. Dove Singer had risen to her feet, addressing the council with unmistakable authority. The men fell silent, even Spotted Wolf, as she spoke at length, her words measured but forceful. "What is she saying?" Sarah whispered to Running Elk. "She speaks of women's wisdom," he replied, surprise evident in his tone. "I says children are sacred gifts, regardless of their parents' tribe. Says the Council of Women supports my claim of protection." He glanced at Sarah. "This is unexpected, powerful." When Dove Singer finished, she looked directly at Spotted Wolf, adding a final statement that made the warrior flinch as if struck. Then she turned to Ironhawk and inclined her head, yielding the floor back to her brother. The chief consulted briefly with the other elders, their heads bent close in intense discussion. Finally, Ironhawk straightened, addressing the tribe in a voice that carried the weight of final judgment. "The council accepts my claim," Running Elk translated for Sarah, relief evident in his voice. "You and your children are granted protection of the tribe. You will live among us, learn our ways, contribute to our survival." He paused. "And I am responsible for you in all things." A collective exhalation seemed to pass through the gathering. Though not everyone appeared pleased with the decision, the matter was settled. Ironhawk had spoken, with the support of both Grey Wolf and Dove Singer. Even Spotted Wolf, after a moment of tense silence, gave a curt nod of acceptance before turning away, his followers dispersing behind him. The council began to break up, people returning to their daily tasks with the occasional glance towards Sarah and the twins. Grey Wolf approached, his ancient face creased in a smile. "The vision takes root," he said, touching the carving still clutched in Sarah's hand. "Now it must grow." As the elders departed, Running Elk turned to Sarah, his expression both relieved and solemn. "It will not be easy," he warned. Some, like Spotted Wolf, will take time to accept you. Others may never truly welcome you." "I understand," Sarah replied. "We'll face that together." The words slipped out before she could consider their implication, but she didn't regret them. Something had formed between them during these fraught days, a bond of trust and mutual respect that felt like the foundation of something stronger. Running Elk's eyes softened, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Yes," he agreed. "Together." Dovesinger approached, her expression impossible to read. She studied Sarah for a long moment, then reached out to touch each twin gently on the head. "Bring children to Women's Lodge when sun reaches highest point," she instructed. "Begin learning our ways." Her gaze shifted to Running Elk. "You chose well, nephew. She has courage." "We'll need it." As she walked away, Sarah looked questioningly at Running Elk. What was that final thing she said to Spotted Wolf, the part that made him flinch? Running Elk hesitated, then answered softly. She reminded him that his wife, before she died, once sheltered a lost white child during a blizzard, returned him safely to his family. Said his wife would be ashamed to see him deny the same mercy to innocent children. Sarah absorbed this, understanding better the complexity of the relationships and history surrounding her. There have been acts of kindness on both sides, haven't there? Small mercies that get forgotten in the larger conflicts. Yes, Running Elk agreed. Though too few, perhaps. Then maybe that's where we begin, Sarah suggested, looking down at her children, now both awake and regarding the strange new world with wide, curious eyes, with small mercies that grow into something more. Running Elk's gaze followed hers to the twins. After a moment, he extended his hand toward James, who promptly grabbed his finger with surprising strength. The warrior's face transformed with a genuine smile that reached his eyes, softening the lines of hardship and struggle etched there. "Small beginnings," he agreed, "strong roots." As the morning sun climbed higher over the Apache camp, casting its golden light across wiki-ups and cooking fires, Sarah Williams stood beside the warrior who had defied his tribe to save her family. Before them stretched a future neither could have imagined days earlier, uncertain, challenging, but alive with possibility. Emma cooed softly, reaching toward the sunlight as if trying to catch it in her tiny hands. The sound, so innocently joyful, seemed to embody Grey Wolf's vision, not of perfect peace or easy solutions, but of life continuing, of hope persisting even in the shadow of loss and conflict. Running Elk gazed at Sarah, his expression conveying what words in either language could not yet fully express. She met his eyes steadily, no longer afraid of what she saw there. Together, they turned toward the camp, toward the lodges and people that would become home and family to the children of two worlds, carried forward by sacred protection and the courage to believe in a different path.